Hey there, night traveler. Before you drift off, how about we sail back in time? Close your eyes and picture this, a wooden ship rocking gently on the waves. The scent of salt and old rope in the air. Lanterns swinging above creaky hammocks, and below deck, 100 tired souls whispering stories as the sea sings them to sleep. Tonight, we're diving into the soothing and sometimes strange bedtime rituals of sailors aboard 18th century British ships. It's a tale of hammocks, hushes, shared dreams, and the quiet beauty of rest, even in the middle of an endless ocean. So if you're ready to drift off with the tide, make sure to tap that like button, subscribe for more sleepy history voyages, and settle in, because the stars are out, and the wind is waiting. Chapter 1. Sunset on the deck, soft creak of wooden boards, seagull in the distance, gentle waves lapping against hull. So, you've stepped aboard. Welcome. It's late afternoon, on an 18th century British ship, one that spent all day creaking across waves, pulling sails, and chasing the horizon. Now, the sun's heading down. That golden glow is touching everything: the ropes, the sails, even the faces of sailors winding up their day's work. The ship looks almost magical, bathed in orange light, like it's dipped in candle wax. Down, on deck, things are slowing. Not stopping. This is a ship, after all, but softening. The last chores of the day are wrapping up. A sailor coils thick rope into neat spirals, his fingers moving on muscle memory. Another lowers the sails, the canvas flapping one last time before it rests. You might hear the sound of a broom brushing salt off the boards. Not glamorous, but salt eats wood. Even old sailors know the sea has teeth. The mood shifts. You feel it. It's not loud anymore. The shouting, the work songs, the slap of heavy boots, all easing into quiet. The ship's bell rings low and slow. It's time for the change of watch. Some men climb below to sleep. Others step up to take their place, rubbing their eyes, adjusting belts. A nod here, a soft grunt there. No need for words. Everyone knows the drill. The air feels different too, cooler, like the ocean's exhaling. You lean on the rail. There's a breeze brushing your cheeks, carrying that smell: salt and tar. A little wet rope, maybe even old fish. Not pleasant exactly, but somehow comforting, familiar. Overhead, the sky changes gears. The soft blues and whites of day fade into bruised purples, dusty reds. It's the kind of sky that painters dream of. And just when you think it's done, the first star blinks awake. There it is. The sin night is here. A sailor mutters, "Sky's clear." That's a good omen. Another one responds, "Unless it's too clear." Then the wind dies. There's a laugh. Maybe a superstition, maybe not. But out here, everything means something. A pipe is lit. The scent of burning tobacco floats past. Nearby, a man sharpens a knife with long, slow strokes. Another hums a song, nothing you'd recognize, but it sounds old, old like the sea. Down below, the cook's already banging a pot or two. Supper's not much, maybe salted beef, or dry biscuit, or something boiled so long no one remembers what it was. But it's warm, and warm counts. Some men eat right on the deck, legs dangling over the edge, staring at the horizon like they're waiting for it to speak. Others sit in a circle, trading stories too ridiculous to be true. But who's going to fact-check them out here? Even the ship itself feels sleepy. It groans a little, sways more gently, like it's getting ready to drift with the crew into dreams. You might notice a man staring up at the stars, lips moving, not talking, praying maybe, or remembering something. Back home, someone might be watching the same sky. A few sailors head for the hammocks. The fabric creaks as they climb in, one foot swinging gently to keep balance. They shift, sigh, settle, and then the quiet stretches. The sky darkens fully. A few lanterns flicker along the deck, casting soft gold puddles on the boards. The sea, now ink black, reflects a million tiny stars. This is what peace looks like out here, not silence, exactly, but harmony. One last rope is tied off, one last bootstep fades, and then it's just you, the sea, and the stars. Breathe in. You're part of the rhythm now. Tomorrow brings more wind, more rope, more sails, but tonight, just rest. The sea has the watch now. Chapter 2. The smell of salt and sleep. Night had settled like a soft wool blanket across the sea. The last rays of daylight had faded from the sky, and above the mast, a curtain of stars had unfolded. The ship creaked and swayed, its timbers settling into the calm rhythm of the dark hours. It was the kind of night where everything felt quieter, not just the ship, but the world. Voices were low, footsteps slowed, and in that hush, something else made itself known. The smell. It was always there, of course, but somehow it grew stronger at night. Maybe because there was less to distract the nose, or maybe because the breeze knew when to soften just enough to carry it across the deck. And down below, a mix of salt, tar, wood, and sweat. A blend only a ship could make. And to a sailor, it was home. Salt came first. Not the kind on your table back in Portsmouth, but the raw, wild scent of it blown straight off the waves. Sharp and fresh and a little bitter. It clung to the sails. It lived in the ropes. It crusted in little crystals on the edges of jackets and boots. If you pressed your hand against the rail and then licked your fingers as many a curious lad had, you'd taste it. Then there was the tar, warmed by the sun, now cooled in the night, thick and sticky, smeared along the seams of the planks to keep the sea out. The smell was dark and heavy earthy, almost but weirdly pleasant, like leather, if leather had been dipped in a barrel of old pipe smoke. Tar meant protection. Tar meant a ship ready for the sea. Mixed with that was the wood. Not just fresh timber, but wood that had soaked in years of waves and wind. The floors creaked with it. The beams overhead held the scent of storms and sunshine and spilled grog. Even the hammocks had picked it up over time, a whisper of pine and oak, carried in every sway. And of course, there was sweat. Not the unpleasant kind, but the honest kind. The sweat of men who had hauled sails and swabbed decks and climbed ropes all day. It was work scent, muscle scent. A salty skin smell that somehow added warmth to the rest. Put it all together, and it didn't smell like a perfume shop, but it didn't smell bad either. It smelled right, oddly comforting, like an old coat that still fits just right, or a book whose pages are frayed from being read too many times. Below decks, the smell wrapped around the men like another blanket. The air was thick, but familiar. It filled the lungs, slowly, gently. If you had just come aboard for the first time, you might wrinkle your nose, but after a few nights, you stopped noticing, and then, after a few more, you missed it if it wasn't there. Some sailors swore they could smell the ship even in their dreams. Others said they carried it on their skin, even months after stepping back on land. There was a kind of comfort in that, because out here 2,000 miles from home, with nothing but sea in every direction, the scent of the ship was a reminder that not all was unfamiliar. It was the same each night. The same after storms, the same during calm. It didn't change when the world around it did. The smell was a friend that didn't talk much but always showed up. Old Jack once said the ship had a nose print, like a fingerprint, but for the nose. And every ship was different. He'd been on 7, and said he could tell them apart with his eyes closed. This one, he'd mumble as he patched a torn sheet of canvas, smells like a pine tree fell in love with a fishmonger. Everyone laughed, but he wasn't wrong. Some ships smelled cleaner, some smelled older, some had more tar, less salt, some had a hint of mold in the hold or onions in the galley. But every one had its own personality, and just like a person, that smell told you how the ship was doing. If something didn't smell right, you knew to look closer. Maybe the bilge needed pumping. Maybe there was rot somewhere in the hull. Maybe someone had gotten sick. The nose always knew, especially at night. And still, for all its strangeness, the smell of the ship was safe. When you lay in your hammock, half swaying in the dark, that scent settled with you. It eased over your blanket. It whispered against your pillow. And without even thinking, your body relaxed. Your shoulders softened. Your breathing slowed. It was like the ship was saying, "You're all right. You're here. You're not floating alone." And that meant something, especially when the waves rocked. A little harder, when the sky was darker than usual. When your thoughts drifted too far from shore. Some nights, a sailor might sniff the air and smile, not because it smelled good, but because it smelled familiar. And familiarity, out on a wooden ship in the middle of the endless sea, was worth more than gold. By the time most of the crew turned in, hammocks gently swaying, and boots stacked in quiet corners, that scent filled every corner of the lower deck. It hung from the beams like mist. It tucked into blankets. It curled in the folds of linen shirts. No one talked about it. No one had to. But it was there. Always there. A mix of brine and breath, and timber and time. And for the men who lived on the water, it wasn't just the smell of the ship. It was the smell of sleep. Chapter 3. Below decks, the world beneath. You've just stepped out onto the deck as the sun sinks low and night wraps around the ship. Now it's time to go deeper to a secret world hidden below the bustling decks, where whispers and soft light guide you into the realm of rest. Welcome to the sleeping quarters. Stepping into the world beneath, as you descend the narrow, creaking stairs, the sound of the sea above becomes a distant murmur. The heavy wooden steps groan under each foot, as if they're telling you, "We're here now, relax." The air grows cooler and quieter, a gentle contrast to the lively deck above. At the bottom, you push open a heavy door, and there it is, a long, narrow corridor dimly lit by a few flickering lanterns. The walls are rough-hewn stone, worn smooth by centuries of use. There's a scent here of salt, wood, and just a hint of something like old spices. It's not unpleasant. In fact, it feels real, like a secret the ship has kept for a long time. You walk slowly down this corridor, careful not to disturb the silence too much. Along the way, you see closed doors and small niches where personal belongings might be kept. Every sound echoes softly, a reminder that in this hidden space, you're in the quiet heart of the ship, a space for sleep and solace. Then, you come upon the sleeping quarters. Here, the lanterns cast a soft, golden glow that barely holds back the darkness. The room is compact, a tight living space carved out of the ship's belly. There are rows of hammocks hanging from sturdy beams, each one swaying gently as if cradling the memories of countless dreams. Imagine this: the hammocks, strung with care, sway lightly with the motion of the ship. They move in sync with the slow, rhythmic lull of the ocean, a soft, continuous cradle that soothes the body and calms the mind. The fabric is worn but comfortable, a testament to the years of use by sailors who've trusted this small world to help them forget the storms above. In one corner, a couple of sailors share a quiet conversation in hushed voices. Their eyes occasionally meet in a silent nod, acknowledging that even in close quarters, some unspoken respect must be maintained. Overhead, a small window lets in just enough starlight to cast delicate shadows on the wooden floor. The gentle shimmer adds to the soft atmosphere, almost like the room is breathing slowly, inviting you to do the same. The unique charm of narrow spaces. The sleeping quarters are not spacious by any modern standard. In fact, they are quite narrow. There isn't much room to move around, and every sound, every rustle of fabric, every quiet sigh echoes off the walls. Yet there's a strange comfort in that confinement. When the space is tight, you feel closer to the ship, to your fellow sailors, and even to your own thoughts. There's no room for isolation here. Instead, the narrowness creates a kind of community, even in silence. Sometimes, you might catch a glimpse of a friend's smile as you both settle into your hammocks, acknowledging the little joys of shared hardship. And yes, sometimes the closeness leads to the occasional bump or whispered apology. "Oh, sorry," becomes the gentle mantra of the night. Even in cramped quarters, people make room for kindness. The soundtrack of the underdecks. Listen carefully. The sounds here are different from those above. There is a soft creak of wood, the whisper of the ships settling under the weight of the night, and the occasional murmur from a sleeper. It is as if the entire room is telling a quiet, timeless story. One might hear the faint scrape of a wooden beam shifting as the tide changes outside, or the sigh of a hammock swaying in response to a gentle gust below decks. Sometimes, in the stillness, you even catch a distant, soft hum, perhaps a sailor, softly singing a lullaby or whispering prayers to the stars. The sound of breathing, a meditative chorus that forms the background of this hidden sanctuary, adds to the calm. Sharing a moment in silence in this small underworld, privacy is a luxury. The hammocks hang close, and your neighbor's soft snores mix with your own quiet breaths. And that's okay, because here, silence is golden. A man in a nearby hammock shifts, his eyes opening for a split second to offer a weary but friendly smile. Another sailor turns over, drawing his blanket closer, as if to hold on to the warmth a little longer. The room is a patchwork of soft murmurs, gentle exchanges, and the steady rhythm of life at sea. It's not a loud place. There's no shouting about matters of the day. Instead, there are gentle nods, brief words of comfort, and an unspoken understanding that each person here has their own story, their own burden of the waves. The hammocks embrace now. Take a moment to imagine yourself in that hammock. The fabric sways gently, almost in a slow dance with the rocking ship. Every creak in the wood, every dip in the tide, cradles you like the gentle arms of the ocean itself. There's a hypnotic quality to it. Your eyes follow the soft movement, your breathing becomes slower, your mind drifts. All your worries, the pressures of the day, the endless stretch of the sea, they start to fade away. In the quiet of the below decks, amid the muted glow of lantern light, a sense of calm washes over you. This isn't just sleep, this is a form of meditation. It's a moment of pure, simple peace, finding comfort in confined spaces while it might seem that being crammed in a narrow space would drive you mad. There's a strange comfort in it too. In this tight space, you realize there's nowhere else to go. The room, with its worn wood and soft hum of voices, becomes a part of you. Every sound, every faint whisper, every shifting silhouette is part of your nighttime ritual. It's like the ship itself is cradling you gently in its belly, promising that come morning, you'll face the vast, unpredictable ocean with renewed strength. And in that promise lies the magic of these underdecks, the heartbeat of the vessel. That keeps everyone connected, even when the sea outside is endless and wild. A quiet glow in the dark at intervals, a lantern flickers, casting dancing shadows on the walls. These shadows move slowly across the ceiling, creating the illusion of gentle waves even in the small room. It's a subtle reminder that life continues on, even in the confined quarters beneath deck. You might catch a glimpse of an inscription on the wall, a sailor's name, carved in hurried letters by someone who wanted to be remembered. It adds a human touch to the rough stone, a soft tribute to the fleeting moments of calm in an otherwise stormy life. The end of the nightly routine eventually. As the night deepens and the world outside quiets further, the room slips into a soothing lull. You feel your body relax further into the hammock's embrace. The soft creak of wood, the murmurs of distant voices, and the slow, steady rocking all combine into a natural lullaby. In that quiet, the pressures of life at sea, the endless working days, and the sound of the ocean seem to melt away. All that remains is a tender silence that holds you close, and as sleep creeps in, you know you'll wake to a new day on the same endless water, rested, peaceful, and ready to face what comes. Final thought. So tonight, let the soft sway of the hammocks and the quiet glow of the lanterns soothe your mind. Close your eyes, let the gentle rocking of the ship carry your dreams. And remember, even in the narrowest space below deck, there is a world of calm waiting to embrace you. Chapter 4. The Hammock Ritual. There's a certain art to falling asleep on a moving ship. It's not like sinking into a soft bed at home. No fluffed pillows, no quiet ticking of a clock. Instead, there's a creak above your head, a sway under your body, and 100 boots stacked in the shadows. And at the center of it, all the hammock. To the landlubber, it looks like a sagging bit of cloth strung between two posts. But to a sailor, it's home. It's the one soft place on a hard wooden world. And getting it just right, that's a nightly ritual, and half by muscle memory, half by superstition. How sailors prepared their hammock, knots, angles, spacing. You didn't just flop into a hammock. That's how you ended up with a bruised backside and a few laughs at your expense. No, setting up your hammock was a slow, practiced thing. First, you unrolled it from where it had been stowed, tight and neat, like a scroll waiting to be read. Some men tied them with a specific number of loops, always the same, as if those knots held their luck. Then came the rigging. You tied each end to wooden beams or iron hooks in the low ceiling. Not too tight, or it'd be stiff as a board. Not too loose, or you'd sag to the floor like a sleepy banana. Angle mattered too. A slight tilt kept your head just a bit higher than your feet, good for the sinuses. Old sailors would say with a wink, though no one really knew why. Spacing was life or death, or at least bruises and cursing. Hammocks hung close together, like bats in a cave. Too close, and you'd elbow your neighbor every time you turned. Too far, and you'd be swinging, like a church bell with no one around to stop you. Every man had his spot claimed, respected, never questioned. You didn't just take someone's hook, not unless you fancied a black eye and a busted lip. Unspoken rules. No snoring near the officer's life on a ship came with rules. Some written down, many not. And hammock etiquette. Oh, it had plenty. Don't snore near the officers. That was a big one. Even if the officers had nicer quarters, their ears were sharp. A loud snorer within range could wake the lieutenant, and no one wanted to see him at 2 a.m. with his boots on, scowling like thunder. Men developed tricks. One sailor slept with a rolled sock tucked under his chin, hoping it kept his mouth closed. Another tied a handkerchief across his nose like a bandit. Didn't help much, but it showed effort. There were other quiet codes too. Don't swing too hard. You might send the whole row of hammocks swaying like a line of sleepy dominoes. Don't talk too much. Stories were fine whispers. Even better, but no shouting across the hammocks. This wasn't a tavern. Don't climb into someone else's, even by accident. That was just weird. And if a man fell asleep with his boots still on in his hammock, the others would gently untie one end and let him roll out like a log. Not mean, just a reminder. Boots off first, mate. The rhythm of swinging sleep once settled though. Oh, what a feeling. The hammock would catch your body like a cradle. Soft cloth under your back, the ship gently rocking beneath it. And your hammock, it rocked with the ship, a rhythm within a rhythm. Not too fast, not too slow. Just that steady, back and forth, lull. Like the sea had hands, and those hands were singing you to sleep. At first, your muscles resisted. Your brain still buzzed with the day ropes pulled. Orders shouted, salt on your lips. But then the rocking took over. Breath slowed. Eyes got heavy. Sometimes you'd feel yourself swing just a little extra when a wave rolled by. Other times, you'd drift into sleep so deep you didn't notice the motion at all, only the stillness it created inside you. That's the strange part. The ship moved, but somehow, you felt still. Wrapped in canvas, surrounded by snores and sighs, you weren't just resting, you were letting go. Some men had little tricks to fall asleep faster. One rubbed his fingers together softly until he drifted off. Another whispered a few lines from a song his mother used to hum. A few hung lucky charms from the rope bits of ribbon, wood carvings, tiny crosses. Whatever it took to ease the mind, because sleep was precious. You didn't know if you'd be called up midnight. Storms didn't wait for morning, neither did captains, so every moment in the hammock mattered. Some said you had to make peace with the motion, that if you fought this way, you'd never sleep. But if you surrendered, you'd dream better than on land. And maybe that was true, because the best dreams always came when the hammock rocked just so, when the wood groaned soft above you, when your body forgot the hard day behind it and floated somewhere quieter. You dreamed of home, of still water, of firelight, of laughter far away, but mostly you dreamed of the sea, carrying you forward. Final thoughts. The cradle of the deep for sailors. The hammock wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a ritual, a rhythm, a return to self. It was the one place where the world shrank, where it was just you, a swaying bit of cloth, and the breath of the sea whispering close. You could be a deckhand or a cook, a boy barely 16 or a weathered old salt butt. Once you were in that hammock, you were all the same, just a tired soul, rocked to sleep by the ocean. Chapter 5. Shared spaces. Silent rules, ambient sounds, wood creaking softly, muffled breathing, a sailor's boots stepping lightly on planks. All right, let's be honest, sailing across the open sea sounds dreamy. Adventure, stars above you, the endless blue all around. But let's talk about what it's really like when you're stuck living with 100 other sweaty guys, day in and day out, with about as much personal space as a sardine in a tin. Welcome to life aboard an 18th-century British ship, where privacy is a myth, elbows are everywhere, and silence, well, silence is golden. Tonight, we're heading into the most delicate part of ship life, shared spaces, and the quiet rules that kept everyone from losing their minds. No doors, no walls, just you and everyone else. Picture this, a long wooden room below deck, hammocks swinging gently from beam to beam, every one of them filled with someone snoring, muttering, or quietly scratching their beard. You've got maybe 18 inches between you and the next guy. No curtains, no walls, just cloth, breath, and body heat. And it's not like this was just for sleeping. This was your bedroom, living room, break room, and sometimes your sickbed all rolled into one. You couldn't exactly say, hey, I need some meat time. There was no meat time. It was all wheat time, all the time, respecting the quiet. With so many people packed into one space, you'd think the noise would be unbearable. But actually, things were surprisingly quiet most of the time. Not because sailors didn't talk, or they did, but because everyone learned fast. Noise travels, and tempers boil quick in tight quarters. There were unspoken rules, and one of the biggest was simple. Don't be loud when others are trying to sleep. You didn't shout. You didn't laugh like a hyena at your friend's bad joke. And you definitely didn't start singing sea shanties at bedtime, unless you wanted to get a boot thrown at your head. Even footsteps were softer at night. Voices dropped to whispers. A cough was met with a half-dozen annoyed glares. It wasn't fear. It was mutual respect, like, "Hey, I'll keep my mouth shut tonight if you do the same tomorrow." Avoiding elbows and other body parts in the narrow passageways and cramped hammocks. Bumping into people was just part of the deal, but that didn't mean it was welcome. There was a whole art to avoiding other people's elbows, knees, feet, and you learned where to step, how to duck under swinging hammocks, and how to lie perfectly still so your hammock didn't brush someone else's. Because the second you started swinging too much, someone else started swinging too, and nobody wanted a full-on hammock collision in the middle of the night. It was a kind of choreographed ballet, just with less grace and more grunting. The sacred code of the hammock was your sanctuary. Not much, but it was yours. It held your blanket, your coat rolled up like a pillow, and maybe even a small pouch with a letter from home. It was your spot. You didn't touch another man's hammock. You didn't sit on it. You didn't even look like you were thinking about swinging in it. Breaking this rule was like stepping on someone's soul. You'd be known for it, whispered about, and given the cold shoulder faster than you could say reef the mainsail. That little bundle of canvas was the closest thing to privacy you had, and it was treated with quiet reverence, sharing warmth. Even if you didn't like each other, nights at sea could get cold, real cold. And despite how packed the room was, the damp chill had a way of creeping in through every crack in the wood. So guess what? Even if you didn't get along with the guy next to you, you both knew body heat was survival. Sometimes hammocks were strung so close that arms or legs touched. It wasn't cozy. It wasn't romantic. It was just reality. You'd wake up, half frozen, elbow to elbow, with someone who stole your biscuit the day before. But in that moment, all was forgiven because your knees were warm. Trust grows in tight spaces, living like that cheek to jowl, breathing the same stale air. You got to know people in a very real way. You saw them at their best. You saw them at their worst. You saw what made them laugh, what made them angry, what they muttered about in their sleep. And something kind of beautiful happened in that mess. You built trust. You knew the guy next to you would cover for you on deck if you overslept. He'd share his last spoon of stew if you were sick. He'd give you a nod in the dark that said, "I got your back." Because when you live together like that, you stop being just sailors. You start being a crew. Nightly rituals without words. There was a rhythm to bedtime on the ship. It didn't need instructions. You could feel it in the way people moved, the quiet shuffle, the soft grunts as hammocks were climbed into, the creak of ropes tightening just so. Someone might whisper a prayer. Another might wrap his coat tighter and sigh. A third might lay back with his hands behind his head, staring at the low ceiling, imagining the stars above. No one needed to say a word. It was understood. The day was over. Tomorrow would be another haul. But tonight was rest. When rules were broken, of course, not everyone respected the silence. Every once in a while, some poor soul usually knew would come in too loud, trip over someone's foot, swing his hammock too hard, laugh at the wrong time. He'd learn, not through violence usually, but through the unmistakable power of glares from 20 tired sailors, a chorus of huffs, groans, and the long, dramatic, really, lesson learned. A family in all but name. At the end of the day, shared spaces built something rare. They built a family not by blood, but by proximity, by need, by shared hardship and long nights rocking on dark waters. You didn't choose your shipmates, but you learned to live with them. You learned to care for them, even when they snored, especially when they cried quietly in the night, missing home. And that made all the difference. Final thoughts. So if you ever find yourself complaining that your roommate left dishes in the sink, imagine living in a floating wooden hallway with 100 other souls, where silence is sacred, elbows are unavoidable, and trust is born in the dark. Life on a ship wasn't easy, but in the quiet, crowded spaces below deck, something peaceful formed, a soft understanding, a shared warmth, a bond, built one hammock swing at a time. Now close your eyes, let the creaking timbers and soft breathing surround you, and rest easy. You've got good shipmates tonight. Chapter 6. Final meal. Salted goodnight before hammocks creaked, before lanterns dimmed, before the low hum of sleep filled the deck. There was one last thing, the final meal. It wasn't grand, no roast, no stew, no warm bread fresh from the oven, but it was something, and out at sea, something was enough. This was the sailor's goodnight kiss from the galley. a hunk of biscuit, a bite of salted meat, and maybe, if the gods were kind or the rum wasn't locked up, a little mug of grog. Not much, but it did the job. And somehow, it tasted just right under the stars. Late evening rations, ship's biscuit, salted beef, maybe a mug of grog. Let's be honest, ship's biscuit wasn't winning any awards. It was more brick than bread, hard, dry, and capable of breaking a tooth if you weren't careful. Some men softened it with a dunk in grog, others just gnawed on it slowly, like a dog with a bone. Then came the salted beef, tough, chewy, salty, enough to make your lips pucker. It had been packed in barrels weeks or even months ago. Sometimes a bit of it looked suspicious, a little too green, a little too shiny. That's when sailors whispered warnings and quietly passed it to the side. But when your stomach grumbled, you ate anyway. Not because it was delicious, but because it was familiar. It filled the gap between hunger and sleep. And grog, well, that was the silver lining. Half rum, half water, or maybe more water than rum if the quartermaster was stingy. A little citrus, if you were lucky. Warm, if the cook had thought ahead. It wasn't fancy, but it warmed your chest and took the edge off the salt. Some said it helped sleep come quicker. Others just liked the taste of something, not beef or biscuit. Either way, it was a comfort, a liquid sigh after a long day. Why? It was less about flavor, more about comfort. Let's be real, no one looked forward to the taste of the final meal. It wasn't the flavor that mattered, it was the ritual. You'd sit down cross-legged on a crate, maybe perched on the edge of a barrel, your messmates beside you, a soft clatter of tin plates, a scrape of spoon against wood. The air smelled like salt and smoke. Your body was sore, your eyes heavy, and somehow that little plate of rough food felt like permission to stop. Stop working, stop talking, just chew, just breathe, just be. Even if the food wasn't good, it was predictable, and predictable things brought peace. You knew what it would be. You knew how long it would take to finish. You knew, without a doubt, that once it was done you could go string up your hammock and rest. It was the line between day and night, between duty and dreaming. Rituals of eating together before turning in the final meal wasn't fancy, but it was shared, and that mattered more than anything. Sailors sat in little groups, not organized but gathered by habit. Friends, messmates, old hands, and new boys. Sometimes there were jokes, sometimes only quiet chewing. A few would say a short prayer before lifting their biscuit. Some made jokes about the beef being older than the youngest deckhand. One man always saved a crumb for the rats, not because he liked them, but because he said, a well-fed rat squeaks less. There were unspoken rituals, like who got the last drops of grog, who told the day's best joke, who stayed behind to wipe down the table, usually the one who spilled their portion. No one needed rules, it just flowed. And that sharing, that small, quiet moment of being together before everyone scattered to their hammocks, it meant something. That reminded them they weren't alone out here, that they were part of something, even if it was just a ship with creaky floors and bad beef. Sometimes a man would hum while he chewed, a tune from home. Sometimes others would join in, not a song, really just a low sound, carried by memory and salt. Other nights, no one spoke at all, just the sound of cutlery, the flap of canvas above, and the sea slapping gently at the hull. And even on those quiet nights, you could feel the comfort in routine. The plate, the cup, the warmth in your belly. You'd finish, wipe your mouth with your sleeve, and sigh like the day was finally done. It wasn't a feast, but it was enough. And on a ship always moving, always working, sometimes just enough felt like a gift. Final thoughts. A salted goodnight. That last meal wasn't about taste. It was about timing, about knowing that, after it was done, the night could begin. The stars would come out, the lanterns would flicker, the hammocks would swing, and the belly, however roughly filled, would be satisfied. It wasn't the food that sailors missed most when they were gone from the sit, was the ritual. The sitting side by side, the quiet laughter, the steam from the grog, the clink of tin. It was the end of the day wrapped in salt, steam, and silence. A salted goodnight passed from hand to hand, plate to plate, and as the last bite disappeared, as the mugs were emptied and hands wiped on trousers, the ship would settle with its men, ready for rest, ready for dreams. Chapter 7. Cleaning up for slumber. Soft ocean waves, the low creak of rope, a sailor humming faintly in the distance. before bedtime stories and hammocks, before dreams of home or thoughts of the next port, there was something else, cleaning up, or at least trying to. Now, don't go imagining hot showers and bubble baths. This wasn't a spa at sea. This was an 18th century British ship. Things were rough, water was precious, and privacy non-existent. But even here, in the middle of nowhere, rocking on a wooden giant in the wind, the sailors had their little rituals. A moment to scrub the day off, shake the salt from their beard, and feel just a little more human before sleep. Let's dive in, gently, like a sponge into seawater. The seawater splash ritual every evening if the weather wasn't throwing a fit there was a simple routine. Grab a small bucket, lower it over the side carefully, haul up cold, salty ocean water. Then came the splash. Not a full bath, not even close, just a wipe down arms, face, maybe feet. The brave ones did the whole torso, the really brave underarm. Bold move, but hey, it beat sleeping covered in sweat, tar dust, and crumbs from stolen biscuits. Sure, the salt stung a bit, especially if you had rope burns or scrapes from the rigging, but there was something nice about it. Cleansing, sharp, cold, yes, but honest. You wiped yourself off with a rag, or a shirt that was already halfway stiff from salt. And just like that, you were slightly cleaner. Not fresh, not fragrant, but no longer sticky. That counted for a lot. Shaving. If you were fancy now, let's talk about shaving, or the lack of it. Some men went full sea beast, let the beard grow wild like sea moss. But others, especially officers or sailors, trying to stay in good graces, made time to scrape their faces smooth. No mirrors, just a bowl of water, a dull blade, and hope. You'd crouch near a lantern, squinting at your reflection in the side of a spoon or a polished plate. One wrong move, and boom-nicked chin. And since this was before antibiotics, a small cut could turn into a whole situation. Still, there was pride in staying neat. A clean shave meant discipline, meant routine, meant you hadn't given up. And on some ships, weekly inspections were a thing. Dirty fingernails, unshaved cheeks. You might get docked rum rations. Now that's motivation. When there wasn't enough water, fresh water was gold on a ship. It was mostly for drinking and cooking, not bathing. So seawater it was, always cold, always salty, and sometimes full of surprises, like jellyfish fragments or seaweed. The occasional weird fish smell, but hey, it's exfoliating, right? If you were lucky and the ship had recently docked, you might score a tiny basin of fresh water for a special wash, maybe on Sunday, or if you were sick, or if you bribed the cook. Otherwise, salt water did the job, mostly, sort of. Teeth. Let's not talk about it. Did sailors brush their teeth? Kind of. Sometimes, there were no toothbrushes like we know them, but some sailors chewed on sticks or rubbed their teeth with cloth and ashes. Others used crushed charcoal or a finger dipped in vinegar. Mostly, they hoped for the best and prayed they wouldn't lose all their teeth by age 30. Still, before bed, some would at least rinse their mouths with water or grog. It wasn't dental hygiene, but it was something, kind of. Why it mattered. Here's the thing. On a ship where everyone was sweaty, dirty, and packed together, cleanliness mattered. Not for luxury, not for vanity, but for health and survival. Small wounds got infected fast. Lice spread like wildfire. A dirty bunk could mean days of itching or worse. So even if it was just a cold splash, a rough scrub, a minute of peace with a rag and bucket, it mattered. It was a sailor's pause, his reset, a quiet moment to say, I'm still here, I'm still me. And in the world of wind, rope, orders, and chaos, that little ritual, it was gold. The smell of the sea, and feet, let's be real. Even with all the scrubbing, ships smelled, sailors smelled, the hammocks smelled, the boots smelled, and the dog, if there was one, smelled like wet rope. But your nose got used to it, like how you stopped noticing a candle after a while. Except this candle was a mix of seawater, wood tar, and unwashed socks. The evening wipe down helped keep the worst of it in check. A little less funk, a little more comfort. Plus, nothing beats that post-splash feeling when your face is cold, your skin tingles, and the night air hits different, like you've earned your rest. Sleep, at last. So, now cleanly shoed, climb into your hammock, damp hair, soft feet, shirt open, maybe a blanket over your chest. The ship rocked, lanterns dimmed, you smelled salt on your skin. maybe lemon, if someone had rubbed a peel on their neck. You'd close your eyes, thinking of home, or tomorrow's shift, or that one time you tried to wash your armpits during a storm and nearly fell overboard. You chuckle quietly. Someone nearby sighs. The ocean hums beneath. And just like that, sleep takes you. Chapter 8. Lantern light and stories. It's late now. Up on deck, the sails flap gently in the night breeze. The stars blink, scattered across the sky like someone spilled sugar on black velvet. But down below, something else is glowing. Lantern light, low, golden, flickering like a sleepy eye. This is the hour when the ship whispers, not orders, not cricks but stories. The glow that made the darkness gentle life below deck could feel like a cave with a heartbeat. Walls of wood, smells of salt, sweat, and something that may or may not be pickled fish. But when someone lit a one small flame, it changed everything. Shadows softened. The hammocks glowed like cocoons. Faces turned warm in the light. You couldn't see much, but somehow you saw enough. It didn't take much. A candle stub, a gently swinging oil lamp, maybe a spark tucked into a bottle, just bright enough to make the night feel like a friend. Stories begin with a cough, a sigh, or a joke. There was no big announcement. No one stood up and said, "Tonight's tale is titled The Ghost of the Windward Isles." It started quietly. Maybe a cough, maybe someone shifting in their hammock. Then a voice come and slow would say something like, "You ever hear the tale of the sailor who sailed backward into a storm and came out younger?" Or, "Back when I was a deckhand on the Storm Queen, I saw a fish with eyes that glowed green in the moonlight." That was it. That was all you needed. Everyone listened. Even the guy who was pretending to be asleep. Even the guy already snoring. In that warm, flickering glow, you leaned into the story, hoping it would last. Hammock to hammock, like a thread of dreams. These weren't bedtime stories, like the ones you tell kids. They were a little spooky, a little silly, a little sad. Some were true. Most were true enough. But they drifted from hammock to hammock, like little paper boats on water. One man told of a mermaid who sang to him when he was lost at sea. Another swore he'd met a ghost captain who walked the deck barefoot during storms. Someone else said they saw a whale as big as the moon. No one laughed. Not really. Not harshly. Because when you live on a ship where the sea can turn angry, fast, you want to believe that maybe magic is real, even if it's hiding beneath the waves. The gentle voices of the forgotten sailor stories weren't always wild. Some were quiet, even tender. A cook once told of the time he found a kitten in a crate of onions, raised it for 6 months before it jumped ship at port. Another spoke of a girl he left behind in Plymouth. Her name was Rose, or maybe Daisy. Memory gets foggy at sea. Sometimes they just told stories to remember. Like, remember that old bosun who always had candy in his sock. Remember the time we almost hit that floating log and all blamed Jenkins, but it turned out to be the captain's fault. Memories, moments, laughter in the dark. A small way to say, we're still here, together. Laughter without shouting. Fear without screaming. Stories helped pass the time, but they also helped the fear go away. Storms came, sails tore, men got sick, but at night, wrapped in thin blankets and dreams, they reminded each other, we've survived worse. We're still afloat. And if the story was scary, like sea monsters with too many eyes, or ghost ships with no crew, that was okay too, because hearing the story together made the fear smaller. And if the story was funny, about someone falling into a barrel or mistaking a seagull for a signal flag, even better. Laughter warmed the ribs like stew. When the lantern flickers low, one by one, the voices would go quiet. The storyteller might yawn mid-sentence. Someone else might gently snore halfway through the tale. The lantern, still swinging, just a dot of golden flame in the dark. Someone might whisper, "Tell the rest tomorrow." Someone else might say, "Aye." And just like that, the night settled. Not empty, but full. Full of tales, and laughs, and secrets traded under hammocks. Tomorrow will come, but not yet. The sea keeps rocking. The stars keep twinkling. And the ship, this floating cradle of creaks and dreams, carries its crew into another quiet night. A night of rest, of salt and wood and soft stories. So if you're ever near the sea, and the wind is just right, listen close. You might still hear an old voice say, "Let me tell you a tale." Chapter 9. Prayers before the waves. The sea was always moving, always whispering, always waiting. and sailors, those tired, calloused souls, knew they were never truly in charge out there. So, before they climbed into their hammocks, before the lanterns dimmed and the night swallowed the deck, many of them paused, not for long, not loudly, but just enough, a quiet moment, a whispered word, a glance at the ceiling beams like they were cathedral arches. It wasn't just a habit, it was a prayer, a little offering to whatever power might be listening above the clouds, or beneath the waves. How sailors knelt or closed their eyes. For a quick prayer, not everyone knelt. There wasn't always space. For one thing, hammocks hung close, barrels filled corners, boots and buckets made, kneeling a tight squeeze. But still, you'd see it sometimes. A sailor crouched beside his hammock, head bowed, hands clasped, or just resting a hand on the cloth before climbing in. Eyes shut for a moment, lips moving silently. Some crossed themselves. Some whispered names of mothers, wives, sweethearts, left ashore. Some just breathed deep, letting the salt air fill their chest before letting it all go. And then they'd sleep. Just like that. No sermon, no spectacle. Just a soft goodnight to the sea, and whoever watched over it. Others had their own ways. One sailor would tap the edge of his hammock 3 times, always 3 before climbing in. Another carried a folded piece of paper in his pocket. It had no words on it anymore. The ink had long since faded, but he said it was a blessing, written by a priest back home. That was enough. Another lad, barely 17, kept a little pebble under his pillow, said he took it from the church steps in his village, swore it brought calm dreams. Whatever the method, it wasn't about show, it was about stillness, a pause, a way to make peace with the day, and the waves that might rise overnight. Superstitions about blessings and the sea's mood now. Sailors were a superstitious bunch, no doubt about it. You'd never catch one whistling on deck, bad luck it calls. The wind, bananas, also bad luck, and women aboard. Oof. Let's not even get started. So when it came to prayers, many believed they weren't just for comfort, they were for protection. Say your prayer, and maybe the sea stayed calm. Forget your prayer, and maybe the sails tore. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you live on a wooden ship surrounded by endless water, you stop arguing with coincidence. Some men had small crosses carved into their knife handles. Some tied bits of red thread into their sleeves. One old sailor muttered the same phrase every night before bed. Hold me in the hollow of thy hand. No one knew where he learned it. No one asked. But everyone knew better than to interrupt him while he said it. There were even whispered tales, half believed, half hoped, that if a ship had enough men praying, no storm could sink it. No proof, of course, just faith. And sometimes that was more powerful than anything. Tiny moments of faith in a vast unknown at sea. The world felt huge. The sky stretched wider than it ever did on land. The ocean had no edges. The stars blinked, like they were watching, and in all that size, a sailor could feel very, very small. So the smallest act, folding hands, closing eyes, pressing a thumb against a pendant, became something big. A way of saying, I know I'm not alone out here, even if it was just you and the wind. Some men didn't pray to God, exactly. Some mumbled to the sea itself. Others spoke to the moon. Some didn't pray at all, but still sat quiet for a moment, as if listening for something in the hush. It didn't matter who you were, officer or deckman, cook or cannon boy. When the night was dark enough, and the wind was just right, everyone hoped someone was watching over them. And maybe that's what made those bedtime prayers so sacred. Not the words, not the form, but the hope tucked inside them. Some nights, when the sky was clear, and the stars reflected on the sea like a second sky, the whole ship felt like a floating chapel. Wooden beams for walls, salt air for incense, lantern light for stained glass. And in the quiet, 100 little prayers drifted upward, like warm breath on a winter night. Final thoughts, soft prayers and strong seas. There's something about praying on a ship. You don't get to control much at sea, not the wind, not the waves, not even your supper some days. But you can control that one small moment, that whisper, that breath. The world out there is vast, deep, unpredictable. But for a sailor, prayer was like an anchor, something to keep the heart steady, even if the ship wasn't, and whether it was a full kneel with hands clasped, or just a single glance skyward before sleep, it was enough. Enough to quiet the mind, enough to soften the soul, enough to carry you through the night. Chapter 10. The sounds of sleep. Soft ocean breeze, A creaking ship, gentle waves lapping against the hull. The kind of night that leans in close and whispers, "Rest now." Let's step into a moment, a quiet one. It's the middle of the night. On an 18th-century British ship, the stars are scattered above like spilled flour. The lanterns have all gone dim, and below deck, where the world is narrow and full of wood and rope and hammocks, something beautiful happens. Sleep, but not the sleep you find in a feather bed with soft pillows and fresh linen. Nope, this is sailor sleep, raw, real, and rocked by the sea. The groan of timber, the song of the ship. Before you even see the sleeping sailors, you hear the ship. The deep groan of thick beams, stretching and settling like an old man with stiff knees. The faint flap of canvas high above like someone quietly folding laundry in the wind. And then, the slap, the gentle slap of a wave kissing the side of the ship. Over and over, never too loud, never too harsh, just rhythm. A heartbeat made of water. It's the sound of a home that floats. And somehow, it's a lullaby. Snoring, sniffing, shifting, alright. Let's be honest, this isn't a spa. Down, in the bunks, you've got a full choir of snoos, high-pitched whistles, low grumbles, the occasional snort that sounds like someone choked on their dreams, and every now and then someone talks in their sleep, murmured words, garbled names, a sailor calling for his mum, another whispering about stew. True story, someone turns in his hammock with a creak, someone else sneezes into the dark and mumbles, sorry, like the night might be offended, but none of it feels rude. Down, here, this is the music of living, of resting after too many hours on deck. It's messy, but it's peaceful. The sea is the blanket. There's no heater, no duvet, no fireplace to curl up beside. But the ocean's movement, that's the sailor's blanket. The way the ship rocks just gently enough to lull your bones into stillness. The way the hammock swings side to side, like your body's being rocked by some giant cradle made of rope and wood and salt air. Some sailors say they never slept better than in those swinging hammocks, like the sea itself wanted them to dream. You don't have to try to sleep, you just let go. The quiet bond in the dark, you can't see them in the dark, but you know they're your crewmates, the same ones you climbed masts with, hauled ropes with, laughed with, argued with. Now, they're just shapes in the dark, slow breaths, the soft clink of someone adjusting their belt even while dreaming. A sigh that lets go of everything. And even though no one's talking, there's this comfort, a silent understanding. We're in this together. Same ship, same air, same dreams. There's something safe about that. Sometimes, silence speaks. Then there's the stillest part of night, the kind of quiet that feels thick, sacred. The wind settles. The water calms. The snores fade into background hum. And if you really listen, you can almost hear the dreams themselves. Maybe one sailor dreams of home, a warm kitchen, a dog barking in the distance. Maybe another dreams of a storm, but this time he wins. And maybe, just maybe, one old sailor dreams of nothing at all, just the rhythm of the waves, the rock of the hammock, and the comfort of knowing the world keeps floating, even in sleep. Lullabies you can't hum the sound of rope tightening with the wind. You can't write music for a wooden beam groaning gently in the night. But still, it soothes. You don't need words. You don't need melody. You just need the ship. Its creaks, its splashes, its sighs, and they carry you slowly into the kind of sleep you don't want to wake from. So next time you're chasing sleep on land, trying to silence the noise in your head, just close your eyes. Imagine the sea, the hammock, the slow sway of a wooden ship under a starry sky, and let the sounds of sleep take you to Chapter 11, Midnight Watch. Not everyone got to swing in a hammock after supper, while most of the crew curled up in the warmth below, deck wrapped in canvas and dreams. Some were just getting started, because even on a sleepy sea, ships don't run themselves. Welcome to the Midnight Watch, where boots tread softly, ropes stay tight, and the stars blink above like old friends trying to stay awake with you. Not all could sleep, some had the night shift. The ship was never empty of sound. Even at midnight, when the world seemed to pause, the ship carried on. Waves still lapped at the hull. The sails still caught wind. And out on deck, a handful of sailors stood their post. Night shift. It rotated, of course. No one pulled it every night. But when your name landed on the list, that was it. You'd be out there while everyone else was dreaming about taverns, sweethearts, or meat that wasn't salted. It wasn't glamorous. There was no audience, no applause. just you, the dark, and a job to do. You'd pull on your coat, wool still damp from yesterday's spray. Wrap a scarf around your neck if you had one. Tug your boots tight. The rest of the ship snored softly behind you, the hammocks creaking in time, and up you went. Out into the night. Life on deck at midnight. Cold air, silence, stars the first thing that hit you. The cold, not the sharp kind, like in winter, but a heavy, soaking cold that wrapped around your legs and fingers. The kind that crept under your collar and settled in for a while. Like the sea was giving you a hug, but the uncomfortable kind. But oh, the sky. At midnight, it was endless. Deep, dark, blue, almost black, with stars scattered like spilled sugar. No lamps, no fires, just starlight and the soft glow from the horizon if the moon felt generous. The sea mirrored it, a second sky below. You stood between two worlds, both shimmering, both quiet. Every now and then, the sails above creaked, or a rope tapped gently against the mast. It wasn't silent, but it wasn't noisy either. It was peaceful, cold nose, warm breath, one hand on the rail, one eye on the stars. Some men hummed to themselves, some whispered stories, some just listened. Because at midnight, the ship spoke in soft tones, the creak of timber, the flap of canvas, the swish of sea. Even your own boots made gentler sounds up here, like they knew not to wake the ocean. Warm, hands on ropes, soft boots on wet boards. Most of the work wasn't loud. It was about watching, keeping an eye on the rigging, listening for changes in the wind, making sure no fire broke out below, no lantern tipped over, no ship slipped past in the dark. You'd check the ropes, give them a tug, feel their tension. Some were thick as your arm, soaked in brine. Others were worn thin and needed replacing. Your hands learned them like old friends. You could tell their mood just by touch, and if something needed adjusting, you did it. Quiet, slow, no shouting. Just a few nods, a signal or two, and the job was done. Every step on deck mattered. Soft, boots on wet boards, a little splash here, a shuffle there. No one stomped. The ocean didn't like stomping. There was a kind of honor in it. Midnight watch wasn't about muscle. It was about care, attention, quiet strength. The sea didn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathed, and you had to listen close. Some sailors brought hot tea in a tin mug. Others stuffed dried orange peel in their pockets, melled it when they got sleepy. One lad used to recite math tables just to stay awake, not because he liked numbers, but because it kept his brain moving. You'd check the compass, scan the black waves, shift your weight from foot to foot to keep the chill away. And once an hour, you might trade nods with another sailor across the deck. A silence, still here, still here. Sometimes that was all you needed. A different kind of quiet. The midnight watch had its own kind of silence. It wasn't empty. It was full of stillness, of things you noticed only in the dark, like how the ropes whispered when the wind changed, how your breath made little clouds in the air, how the stars moved not all at once, but slowly. If you kept looking, you noticed things. A new creak in the beam, a glint of frost near the rail, the way the waves seemed to glow when the sea turned cold, and somewhere below, the ship's heartbeat slow and steady kept everything afloat. Final thoughts. The midnight kind of peace. Not everyone liked the midnight watch. Some cursed it, some shuffled through it half asleep, but others, ones deep thinking ones, they loved it, because in that hour, before dawn, after the world had turned in, there was a kind of peace no land could give. You stood under a sky bigger than any roof. You breathed air cleaner than any room. You felt the ship moving, not just sailing, but living. And when the next man came to take your place, and you passed him with a nod, you went below with something soft in your chest. Not pride, not joy, just calm. Because while the world slept, you stood watch, and the sea, for one more night, stayed quiet. Chapter 12. Dreams at sea. Soft ambient ocean sounds. Gentle wind, the low creak of wood, and distant seagulls. A peaceful hush, like the whole ship is holding its breath. Let's drift into a quieter place tonight. Not the deck, not the galley, not even the hammocks swinging in the dark. We're going somewhere deeper, quieter, stranger, into dreams. Because out here on the open sea where time is slippery, where the stars look close enough to touch, and the water never ends, dreams feel different, heavier, lighter, wilder, and every sailor had a few tucked inside their soul. Of homes and warm kitchens, it always started the same for most men. Back home they'd dream of the road to their village, the creaky door to the cottage, the warm smell of soup on the stove. They'd see their mother's hands, or hear the neighbor's rooster that never shut up, or feel their dog curl up beside them again, even though the poor thing had probably forgotten their name by now. Some dreamed of wives or lovers blurred by time, smiles remembered too perfectly. And sometimes, in the middle of the ocean night, a sailor would turn in his hammock and whisper a name, then go still again, because the sea couldn't take away everything. Storms that never happened, or did they? Then there were the other dreams, the bad ones, the ship tipping too far, the waves rising like monsters, the sails tearing like paper. Some sailors swore they dreamed of a storm before it came, saw the lightning, felt the cold breath of the wind, and sure enough, days later, the sky would turn. Coincidence, maybe. But when the sea talks, even in dreams, sailors listen. There were also dreams of falling. Not just slipping, but falling forever. Down past the keel, down past the fish, past the bones of sunken ships. No splash, just falling, and waking up breathless. Dreams of gold and ghosts. A few sailors dreamed of treasure. Not just chests of gold, but whole caverns, glowing with light, filled with jewels that hummed like music. They'd wake up with their hands clenched, like they were holding something. And then there were the weird dreams. The ghost ship sliding by in fog. The sailor with no face, calling you by name. The rat that stared too long. The storm that whispered. You'd wake up and look around, just to be sure the dream stayed where it belonged. The morning after now, here's the fun part. Morning comes. The sun rises slow, painting gold on the waves. The hammocks stop swinging. The crew yawns, scratches, spits, stretches, and someone says, "You won't believe what I dreamed." And boom, breakfast turns into story time. The cook dreamed he was frying fish the size of a rowboat. The powder monkey says he was back home, chasing chickens in his skivvies. Someone else dreamed of kissing a woman with the face of a shark. Everyone laughs, even if the night was heavy. The morning was lighter. That's how dreams worked out here. You kept the best. You laughed off the rest. Where memory meets mist, the weirdest thing about dreaming at sea. Sometimes, you weren't sure if something really happened. Did you actually see land yesterday? Did your brother really write you that letter? Or did you dream it? Days blurred, nights stretched, and memories started to float, like driftwood in your mind. You couldn't always grab them, but you saw them, felt them. So maybe a dream wasn't just a dream. Maybe it was a message, a memory trying to come home. The sea dreams to some old sailors said the sea itself had dreams. Stormy ones, soft ones, and if you listened, really listened, you could hear them in the waves, a whisper in the dark, a lullaby in the tide. And when a sailor fell asleep, rocked by the water, maybe he wasn't just dreaming about home. Maybe he was home just for a while. So next time your head hits the pillow and the world starts to fade, let your mind drift. Let the sea carry. You dream deep, dream weird, dream like a sailor. Because out there, beneath the stars and the canvas and the creaking wood, dreams are part of the journey. Chapter 13. Letters from home some nights. It wasn't the sea or the stars that filled a sailor's head. It was a voice, a memory, a piece of paper folded in four and carried close to the heart. Letters from home, if you were lucky enough to get one, were more than just ink on parchment. They were lifelines, anchors, little pieces of land, floating quietly in a sea of endless water. And when the ship was still, and the hammocks rocked gently, many a sailor would reach into his pocket, feel the soft crinkle of paper, and remember, reading or imagining letters from loved ones. Mail didn't come often at sea. Ships couldn't exactly check their inbox. Messages were passed when ships met in port, or when a faster vessel brought news. Sometimes a letter could take months to arrive, but when it did, oh, it was gold. A letter from a wife, a mother, a sweetheart, a younger brother who still called you Stinky, in crooked handwriting. It didn't matter who. The second that seal cracked, and the words spilled out, the ship faded. You were back home. The smell of the hearth, the sound of chickens in the yard, the way your father stirred his tea with a spoon far too loudly. It all came back in a rush. Some men read their letters aloud. Others whispered the words like they were sacred. And some didn't read them at all. They couldn't, not anymore. The ink had faded, or the paper had worn soft from folding and unfolding, or maybe the letter was in their head imagined, but no less real. One sailor said his girl had never written him, but he pictured her words every night. What she might have said, how she'd sign off with a doodle of a cat. He said it was just as good as the real thing. No one argued, because at sea, imagination was often all you had. There were times when a man would unfold a letter and just hold it, not read, not speak, just sit in silence, fingers tracing the edges. It wasn't always about the words. It was about the connection, how the written word connected them to land. Out at sea, land began to feel like a dream. It was far too far. The days rolled by like waves, one after another, blurring into each other. You forgot the feel of grass under your feet, the way doors creaked, the sound of church bells or frying eggs in a pan, but a letter that brought land right back into your hands. You could smell the house in the folds. Maybe it carried a bit of smoke, or perfume, or breadcrumbs stuck in the crease. Some had little flowers pressed inside. One man got a lock of hair, another got a drawing of a cow his kid had made. It looked more like a potato, but he didn't care. You'd read a sentence and hear your mother's voice, or your girl's laughter, or your little sister asking if you'd bring back a parrot. And suddenly, the ship wasn't so lonely. Some men wrote back, of course, carefully, slowly, with scratched pens and borrowed ink. They didn't always know what to say, so they described the sea, the wind, the men, the food, which didn't take long. But mostly, they just said, "I miss you." Sometimes 10 different ways in one letter, and whether or not that letter made it back, that didn't matter. Writing it down helped, like tossing your thoughts into a bottle and letting them float home. Sleeping with folded paper in a shirt pocket, there was a habit many sailors shared. Even if they never spoke of it, they'd tuck the letter into their shirt, right over the heart, or under their pillow, or in a secret pocket sewn into the lining of their hammock. Not for safekeeping, really, but for comfort, like the words themselves gave warmth. Some folded them into tiny squares, worn soft like cloth. Others kept them flat, wrapped in a handkerchief. A few had bundles 5 or 6 letters tied with string, and on rough nights, when the waves slapped the hull and the wind howled like wolves, you'd see a sailor press a letter to his chest and breathe easier. It wasn't magic, but it felt like it. One lad, not more than 16, had only ever gotten one letter from his older sister. It was short, just said, "Don't fall overboard." He kept it folded into the size of a coin and swore it made him laugh even when he wanted to cry. Another sailor had a letter from his father, written before the man passed. The ink was smudged, the handwriting hard to read, but he said he could still hear his father's voice every time he looked at it. Letters were small, fragile, but they held more strength than rope or timber. Final thoughts, the heart tied to home in a world of wood, waves, and wandering stars. It was the written word that reminded sailors they belonged somewhere else too, not just to the ship or the sea but to someone waiting back home. A sailor's letter was never just a letter. It was a story, a whisper, a hug, a reason. Some nights, it helped a man fall asleep faster. Other nights, it made him cry softly into his hammock. But always, it helped him feel less adrift, because no matter how far the ship sailed, no matter how loud the wind or how deep the night, a folded bit of paper in a pocket could carry him all the way back home. Chapter 14. Stormy Nights. Below, soft wind turned suddenly sharp. The low boom of thunder, creaking wood, the distant snap of canvas, faint breathing in the dark. All right, let's not pretend. Not every night on a ship rocked you to sleep like a cradle. Some nights, the sea decided to throw a tantrum. You know the kind where the stars vanish, the clouds grow teeth, and the wind, it screams like it's got something to prove. Tonight, we're going below deck. The storm is howling, the ship is groaning, and the sailors, they're trying to sleep, swinging in the storm. Now picture this. You're in your hammock, rocking, not gently, like before, but hard, like a swing someone pushed too far. 1 second, your nose is up near the ceiling beam. The next, your toes are nearly skimming the floor. The ship lurches, slams, tilts. Wooden walls moan. Some poor guy rolls halfway out of his hammock and slaps right back in like a sack of potatoes, and somehow you're still expected to rest. Sailors called it sleeping through chaos, because even if the world tilted sideways, you still had to function the next day. Above your head, absolute madness up on deck. It's a whole different story. Rain lashes, waves crash over the rails. Men shout orders through the storm. But down here, beneath it all, it's muffled, like thunder wrapped in blankets. You can hear the panic but, just barely, a dull roar, a thump, the rattle of gear, someone yelling something you can't quite make out. The sea is outside trying to punch the ship apart, and you're below, lying in a net, whispering to yourself, please not tonight, fear ... But no screaming. Here's the odd part. No one really panicked out loud. Sure, the younger guys might breathe quick, clench the edge of their hammock, whisper a prayer to a saint they barely remembered, but they stayed quiet. Storms made you quiet, because if you screamed, it didn't help. And honestly, most sailors had already made peace with the sea. Weird, complicated peace. It could feed you, carry you, kill you. It was a moody friend and you were always one mistake away from being tossed overboard. So when the storm came, the fear stayed in the throat, unspoken, but heavy. Tiny rituals for a big fearsome sailors had little tricks to calm themselves. A lucky coin pressed in their palm, a small cross tied to the hammock ropes. One guy swore he could calm any storm by counting backwards from 50, and then starting again. And another, he sang sea shanties under his breath, so quietly no one else could hear. It wasn't about stopping the storm. It was about surviving the night, with your sanity intact. Hammocks like floating caskets. Now, here's a spooky thought. Hammocks swung like coffins on strings. Not exactly comforting, but that's how it was. And some sailors even joked, well, if I fall asleep and never wake up, at least I'm halfway buried. Dark humor, sailor humor. Because when death was a regular visitor, you learned to laugh at him once in a while, even if your laugh came with a shiver. Breath held, eyes closed at some point. You give in. You hold your breath during the worst creaks. You close your eyes during the big wave hits. You pretend the cold isn't crawling through your blanket like a ghost with cold fingers. And maybe you doze off. Just a little, rocked by fear, wrapped in silence, dreaming of anything but water. When it finally passes and then just like that it's gone. The wind softens. The ship stops fighting. The sound fades from fury to hush. You feel the shift, even in sleep. A long exhale. A silence that feels like survival. Someone stirs. Someone snores. No one says it, but you all know you made it through the night. Again, so if you ever think about sailors in the age of wooden ships, don't just picture clear skies and sunny sails. Remember the stormy nights below. The fear wrapped in hammocks. The quiet prayers whispered into thunder. And how sometimes the bravest thing a sailor could do was close his eyes and let the sea rock him anyway. Chapter 15. Illness and sleeplessness some nights. Sleep didn't come, not because of storms or snoring or bad beef, not even because your hammock was swinging like a drunk parrot in a tree. Some nights, a sailor just couldn't sleep, and on those nights, the ship felt different, quieter, heavier, slower. Because when your body ached and your head burned, even the lullaby of the waves wasn't enough. What happened when a sailor couldn't sleep? The first sign was simple. A man didn't climb into his hammock. He sat on the edge instead, elbows on knees, head low, maybe a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, maybe just arms crossed tight against the chill. The others would see him, but no one asked right away, not at first. If it was just a sore back or a restless mind, it might pass on its own. But if he stayed like that for too long, rocking slightly, rubbing his temples, staring at the floorboards, then someone would bring it up, soft and quiet. Can't settle, mate. A nod, maybe a sigh, and then, little by little, the man's struggle became part of the night. Coughs, fevers, and quiet suffering illness came in waves, just like weather. Some months it was colds, others something worse, fevers, coughs, shaking fits that wouldn't quit. A sore throat might start as just that, but with bad food, damp air, and long days, it could grow mean quick. Fevers made the world blur. You'd lay in your hammock feeling like the ship had set fire, even when the air was cold. Coughs were the worst. They broke the silence of the lower deck, echoed through wood and shadows. A hacking, rattling kind of cough that didn't know how to be polite. Some sailors tried to muffle it with their sleeve. Others just gave up and let it fly. A few used old Trixuni if they had it. Bits of lemon peel, warm water stolen from the cook's pot. Nothing really cured it. He just waited it out. If the sickness was bad, the surgeon would come. He wasn't always helpful, just honest. Rest if you can, drink what you can, and let it pass, or don't. Sailors didn't expect miracles. They just wanted comfort, a warm blanket, a hand on the shoulder, a sign they weren't alone in the night. Sometimes a man would toss in his hammock for hours, sweaty, muttering, stuck between dream and nightmare. He'd whisper names, beg for water, ask questions no one could answer. Those were the hardest nights, the ones where no one really slept. Fellow sailors offering quiet comfort, but sailors didn't leave their own behind. If someone couldn't sleep, someone else would notice. A lad would bring water in a tin cup. Another might hand over a dry cloth or the corner of a clean blanket. If the man was shaking, they'd hold his hammock steady, just a hand on the edge, slowing the sway. Sometimes that helped more than any doctor. They didn't say much. Sailors weren't known for long speeches or big hugs, but they had their own language, a nod that meant "I'm here," a hand on the back that said "hang in there," a mumbled "you'll be all right," even if they weren't sure it was true. One sailor, when he couldn't sleep, asked another to hum. Just hum, no words, just a tune from back home. So the other did, quietly, off-key, but it worked. The sick man's breathing slowed, the coughs came farther apart, and after a while he slept, not always deeply, not always long, but enough to feel human again. Even in pain, there was warmth, not from fires, not from food, but from each other. A blanket shared, a shoulder offered, a whispered joke to lighten the air. And sometimes, when a man finally drifted off, the others would sit still. No hammock creaks, no talking, just respect for the one who finally found peace, even if just for an hour. When sleep comes at last, eventually, the body gives in. Even sick ones, the fever drops, the cough eases, or maybe the mind just shuts the door for a bit and lets the man rest. It's a strange kind of sleep, not restful, not joyful, but necessary. You'd hear it, slow breaths, soft snores, the ship's own sigh, and the others. They'd go back to their hammocks, quietly, calmly, because illness wasn't strange on a ship. But kindness, that was the cure they carried with them always. Some men got better, some didn't. That's the truth of life at sea. But no one faced it alone, not really. Even if words were few, even if comfort came in half a mug of warm grog or a soggy cloth on the head, it was something, and sometimes that was all you needed. Final thoughts. The night isn't always kind, but sailors are not every night ended in sleep. Not every sailor ended his shift with a dream, but the ship had its ways, and the men had each other. When one couldn't rest, the others kept him steady. When one cried out, the others listened. And when one drifted, hot with fever or heavy with thoughts, someone nearby stayed awake a little longer, just in case. Because at sea, even the strong fall ill, even the brave lie awake, and even the quietest man will offer his hand when it matters. Chapter 16. The captain's cabin, gentle creaking of wood, the low flicker of an oil lamp, a quiet scratching of quill on parchment. Outside, the ocean sighs against the hull. All right, sailor, let's take a detour. You've seen the hammocks, you've felt the crowded air below decks, you've ducked elbows and tiptoed around snoring crewmates. But now, let's open the one door almost no sailor ever got to step through. Welcome to the captain's cabin. It's not exactly a palace, but compared to the shared world below, this place might as well be a luxury hotel. Let's peek inside, quietly now. The captain's probably still awake. More space, but not quite a mansion, so what's inside the captain's cabin? First, it's bigger. Not big, just bigger. There's room to stand up straight, maybe even pace a little. There's a real bed, not a hammock. Sometimes it even has a thin mattress and a wool blanket. Fancy, right? There's a writing desk too, a heavy one, bolted to the floor. On it, charts, a compass, a battered leather logbook, maybe a wine bottle, tucked behind a candle, if it's been a long week, and walls, covered in maps, strings, pins, maybe a painting of home fading, water-stained, but precious. But don't get it twisted, it's still a ship. There's still damp air and groaning wood. Rats still visit, and the smell, well, let's just say scented candles weren't standard Navy issue. A place for thinking, not sleeping. The captain didn't sleep much, not because the bed was bad, but because the job never really ended. While sailors drifted off in swinging hammocks, the captain was up, writing, planning, worrying. Logbooks had to be updated, wind speed noted, water supplies counted, crew behavior quietly observed, one ear always tuned to the deck above. storm coming, crew on edge, supplies running low. He had to be ready. Being in command wasn't just about shouting orders. It was about watching everything, all the time, even in the dark. Nightly rituals, quill, candle, compass. Every captain had his little routine. First, the logbook. Every evening had its entry, wind direction, weather notes, distance traveled, any punishments handed out, any prayers whispered after a bad wave. Then came the charts, unrolling a map, marking the ship's current spot, estimating tomorrow's heading. Sometimes he'd mutter to himself. Sometimes he'd stare at the flickering flame and whisper, "Let's hope the wind holds." Some captains were stoic, others, nervous wrecks with good posture. Either way, the cabin became their thinking space, their cave of candlelight and caution. A cup, a thought, a pause if the ship was calm and the sea was kind. The captain might pour himself a small cup of rum or wine. Just one. He'd lean back, let the wood creak, and maybe, if he trusted the night, he'd let his thoughts drift home, to a family, a letter he never got to send, a land he hadn't seen in years. He might read an old note, hold a worn coin, touch the edge of a lock of hair hidden in his sea chest, but only for a moment, because the captain didn't get to relax. He only borrowed time from duty. The quiet weight of rank now. Here's the secret. You'd think being captain means power, and sure, it does, but it also means isolation. He eats alone, sleeps alone, walks alone. He can't laugh too loud with the crew, can't play cards, can't cry, can't really be vulnerable, because every sailor looks to him and thinks he has the answers, even when he doesn't, especially when he doesn't. So at night, in this quiet cabin, with candle wax dripping and the sea whispering through the timbers, the captain carries a weight no one else can. Responsibility, authority, and the silence that comes with it. When the light finally goes out, eventually, the lamp flickers low, the ink dries, the maps are rolled. He slips off his coat, lays his sword within arm's reach, and lowers into bed with a sigh that no one hears. His boots stay nearby just in case, and even as his eyes close, the night doesn't let him go, because anything could happen before dawn. Storm, fire, fight, desertion, and the captain, he's the first to rise, the first to face it. That's the deal. So next time you picture a British ship in the 18th century, don't just imagine cannon fire and salty air. Think of that little room at the back, where the weight of the ship settled into the shoulders of one tired man. A flickering lamp, a map half sketched, a heartbeat waiting for morning. That was the captain's cabin, not just space, but burden, candlelight, and sleepless leadership. Chapter 17, When the Moon Was Full. There was something different about moonlit nights at sea. You felt it in your chest before you even looked up. The air seemed thinner, the deck quieter, and when the clouds pulled back and the moon showed its full face, the whole ship paused just for a second. Even the sails looked softer, because when the moon was full, the ocean turned into a dream. The mood on deck during moonlit nights. Most nights, the deck was a shadow world darker than any alley on land. Lanterns flickered here and there, but for the most part, everything moved slow and quiet. But a full moon changed that. Suddenly, the ship glowed. Not bright, exactly, but silvered. Soft light poured over every line and rope. The sails caught it, glowing like quiet ghosts. The deck shimmered. Even the water looked like it was holding its breath. Sailors walked slower on full moon nights, not because they were tired, but because it felt like walking through something sacred. Voices dropped low. Laughter came in short, surprised bursts, then faded like mist. The moon lit up the sea so clearly. Some said you could see fish swimming. Just below the surface, silver flashes in silver water. The night wasn't sleepy. It was awake, but not in a loud way. More like the ship itself was thinking, remembering, listening. Some sailors loved full moons, said it made them feel safe, like a giant candle had been lit in the sky just for them. Others got twitchy, restless, like they were being watched by something that didn't blink, and a few just stared, for minutes at a time, eyes wide, mouth shut, like the moon had reached down and tapped them on the shoulder. Superstitions and whispered beliefs about moonlight now. Sailors were never short on superstitions, and the moon had its fair share. Some swore that cutting your fingernails during a full moon would bring a storm. Others believed that tying knots under moonlight made them stronger, like the ropes could hold secrets better at night. One old sailor claimed he was born on a full moon and couldn't sleep during one. He just paced the deck, muttering about owls and tides. There was also the tale told in hushed tones, usually after a second mug of grog, that full moons made ships disappear, vanished clean off the map. No wreck, no trace, just gone. Of course, no one ever knew someone on one of those ships, but that didn't stop the story from spreading. And then there were the love stories. A few men believed that if you looked at the moon and whispered someone's name 3 times, she'd dream of you that night, no matter how far away she was. Some scoffed, others tried it when no one was watching. Hey, when you're 1,000 miles from shore, hope floats. But not all superstitions were spooky. Some said the full moon made the sea more honest, that it shined into the deep and showed what usually stayed hidden. Maybe that's why so many sailors used moonlit nights to talk about home, about mistakes, about dreams they forgot to chase. Under that light, words felt a little lighter, truths a little easier. How the sea glittered like dreams. The sea under a full moon didn't look real. It glittered not like diamonds, more like stars that had fallen in and were swimming around, just for fun. Every ripple carried a flicker. Every wave had a glowing edge. You could stand at the rail and stare for hours, lost in the sparkle. Some swore the sea talked louder on full moon nights, that it laughed more, that it whispered secrets in languages only the truly tired could understand. And if the moon was high and the sky was clear, you'd sometimes see your own shadow on the waves, stretched out, wavy, dancing with the water. It was strange and beautiful, and just a little spooky. Even the ship's wake, normally dark and plain glowed like the sea, was marking where you'd been, drawing a glowing line to say, you were here. This was your path. Some sailors said the moonlight cleaned things, washed away bad luck, made bad dreams float off into the horizon. And honestly, it felt like it could. You'd hear it in the way men talked before bed. Clear night, moon's full, might sleep deeper tonight, or sometimes won't sleep at all. Feels too bright in my bones. Final thoughts. The sky's lantern, there was no switch to flip, no button to press. Just the moon rising, watching, and glowing without asking permission. It didn't need to explain itself. It just came, and when it did, even the oldest, grumpiest sailor would pause just for a moment to look. Not because he believed in sea ghosts, or love spells, or glowing fish, but because something that beautiful deserved to be noticed. Full moons didn't happen every night, but when they did, they stitched a little wonder into the sails. They gave the sea its sparkle, the sky its softness, and the sailors a little magic to carry back into their hammocks. It wasn't always about dreams. Sometimes it was just about light. Soft, silver light sneaking through cracks, spilling on planks, resting gently on the backs of tired men, like a quiet hand, saying, "You're not alone, not tonight." Chapter 18. Port dreams and shore leave soft ocean sounds. The creak of rope, a sigh as a sailor turns in his hammock. All right, the lanterns are low. The deck is quiet. Even the sea, tonight, seems to be whispering instead of shouting. And down here, in the hammocks, swaying like sleepy swings, the crew has one thing left to do. Dream, but not just any dreams. Because when you're stuck on a wooden box bobbing in the middle of nowhere, with salt in your teeth and blisters on your hands, your dreams aren't random. They're port dreams, the kind that sail you away from the endless blue and straight back to land, if only in your head. So tonight, let's follow those sleepy thoughts. Let's drift through the minds of sailors as they tuck their arms behind their heads and float far, far away. The unofficial national anthem, "Where's My Shore Leave?" Every sailor, matter how tough, grumpy, or sunburned, has one question pulsing through his brain like a drumbeat. How many days till port? Shore leave wasn't just a break. It was everything. It meant walking without swaying. It meant food that didn't come from a barrel. It meant warmth, fresh faces, maybe even a bath if you got lucky and weren't broke. But more than that, meant freedom. For a few precious hours or days, you could stop being sailor number 12 and just be yourself again. And at night, when the ship rocked gently and the moon peeked through the hatch, those dreams would take over. The tavern glow, ale, laughter, and off-key songs. Most port dreams started here. A dark wood tavern, candles flickering, a jug of something strong on the table. Someone's singing in the corner badly, but no one cares. You're dry, warm, your boots are off, and there's food, real food on the table. Meat, potatoes, a pie that doesn't jiggle with mold, and the best part, company, people laughing, sharing stories, a pretty face at the next table, maybe someone leaning in close to hear your tale of that storm off Gibraltar. Even if you embellish a little, you don't get this at sea. You don't talk like this on deck, in dreams. The noise is joy, not orders, and the warmth is earned. The girls they left behind, or hoped to find, of course. Not all dreams stopped at the tavern door. Some drifted into romance, sweethearts from back home, fiancés left behind, or that girl from the last port who said she'd wait. She didn't, by the way, but in dreams, she always does. Other dreams, made up girls entirely, soft faces, gentle voices. People who didn't shout or throw boots or steal your last biscuit. It wasn't about passion, really. It was about tenderness, something soft in a world made of rope, iron, and salt. A sailor's heart, despite all the grime and more grime, still longed for softness, even if just for a night in the mind. Family fires and forgotten fields. Not all dreams were ale and flirting. Some were quieter. A mother's kitchen, the smell of bread, a father's voice telling you to stop slouching. Siblings chasing chickens across a muddy yard. A family dog curling up at your feet. Even if years had passed, even if that home no longer stood, dreams rebuilt it, better than memory could. Some dreamed of hills, rivers, that one tree they used to nap under before they ran off to join the Navy. Some dreamed of what could have been. And that's the thing with sailors. They had miles of sea around them, but home was never far. Not in the quiet, not in the dark. Sleep. A raft on a restless sea, let's be honest. Sleep on a ship wasn't great. Hammocks rocked, rats squeaked, feet hung too low, snores echoed like thunder. But somehow, sleep was still sacred, because it was the only time the ship let you escape. The only time you weren't swabbing or climbing or bracing for wind. And in those hours, your mind could slip through the cracks in the hull and glide back to land. Not the real land, but the land you needed. And that was enough. Morning comes too fast, of course. Dreams never lasted. The bell would ring. The officers' boots would stomp. And just like that, port was gone. You were back, calloused feet hitting cold wood. Maybe you held on to the dream a little. A smile you weren't ready to let go of. A smell that clung like a memory. But the sea doesn't wait. There were sails to raise, buckets to fill, orders to follow, until night came again. And your hammock welcomed you back to that tavern, that kitchen, that quiet field beneath the tree. And you dreamed again. Chapter 19. Waking with the tide, no alarms, no roosters, no cheerful morning jingles. Just the ship itself moving. That's what woke the sailors. Not with a jolt, but with a rhythm, a slow sway, a gentle rock. Like a mother's arms, but saltier and with creakier joints. The ship didn't shout, rise and shine. It just tilted a little left, rolled a little right, and let the men feel the new day arrive. How sailors rose with the ship's rhythm. Every sailor, no matter how groggy or grumpy, knew the feeling. Before his eyes even opened, his body already knew the ship's mood. Was it calm this morning? Was there wind in the sails? Was it going to be another wet day? Or did the planks feel warm underfoot? No need for a bell. Just feel the timber beneath your bones. And if the ship was still sleeping, the sailor might roll in his hammock and catch another minute. But if the timbers groaned, or the ropes snapped, or a shout echoed down from above, well, it was time. Time to swing your legs out and start the day. Some sailors stretched before they stood. Arms up, neck crack, toes wiggled. Others stayed wrapped in their blankets for just one more breath, trying to pretend they were anywhere else, maybe a warm cottage, a quiet inn, or just not on duty. But soon enough, one by one, they climbed out, yawning, rubbing eyes, still half dreaming. And all around them, the ship began to wake too. Hammocks swaying in morning light down below. In the belly of the ship, light came slowly. No sunrise, blazing through big windows, just soft gold slipping in through cracks and open hatches. Dust danced in the beams. Shadows stretched long, and in that gentle light, hammocks still swung, some empty, some not quite ready to be. The creaking ropes sang their morning tune. Creak, sway creak. It wasn't loud, just steady, like the ship was humming a low, sleepy melody to start the day. Some sailors swayed with it for a moment, eyes still closed, listening to the rhythm that had rocked them through the night. It was almost hypnotic, almost enough to pull you back into sleep. Almost others were already sitting up, scratching, beards, sniffing the air like they hoped breakfast might smell better today. Spoiler, it usually didn't. One man yawned so hard he scared the rat in the corner. Another tried to whistle and forgot how halfway through. Another just stared into space for a full minute, like his soul hadn't caught up with his body yet. That's how mornings worked. On a ship, slow, soft, a little silly, but steady. Slow, stretching, yawns, and duty. Once the legs started moving and the eyes stopped blinking like sleepy lanterns, duty kicked in. Sailors weren't allowed to just sit around stretching forever though. Many tried to squeeze in a few extra seconds. A long arm over the head here, a dramatic back twist there, maybe a quiet complaint about an imaginary leg cramp. But eventually, the body gave in. Boots were pulled on, shirts were tucked, sort of, belts fastened, tools checked, and one by one, the sailors made their way up to the deck, blinking like owls stepping into sunlight. Some took deep breaths when they hit the morning air. Some muttered about the cold. One or two mumbled poetry, for reasons no one really understood, but they all showed up, because that was the deal. The tide rose, the ship moved, and so did they. There was something strangely peaceful about it all. No rush, no panic, just a rhythm set by water and wind, not by clocks. The ship moved, the tide pulled, the men followed. A few shared morning greetings, gruff and short but kind, still breathing, I barely good enough. And with that, the day began. Waking with more than the body some mornings. It wasn't just about waking the body, it was about waking the mind, the spirit even. A sailor might pause at the rail, eyes on the horizon, letting the wind slap his cheeks awake. He might remember a dream, something strange and soft and fading fast, a warm hand, a green field, a song his mother used to hum. And in that quiet second, the sea didn't feel so far from land, just another step in a longer journey, just another wave between here and home. One man always said, the sea rocks you to sleep, but it also rocks you back awake. And maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't the rising sun or the shouted orders that started the day. Maybe it was just the tide, lifting the ship, lifting the men, carrying them into the next set of hours. Final thoughts, carried by the morning sea life on a ship wasn't always easy, but it had a rhythm, and in that rhythm there was comfort. Even the mornings, the sleepy, sore, slow mornings, held their own kind of peace, because waking with the tide wasn't like waking on land. It wasn't about alarms or schedules. It was about listening, to the ship, to the sea, to the quiet voice inside that said, time to rise, sailor. The world's still spinning, and you're still part of it. Chapter 20. The ritual repeats. Soft sea breeze, distant creak of rope, faint splash of water against the hull. The voice begins slow, like a whisper carried on salt air. All right, here we are. The ship is quiet again. Lanterns glow like sleepy fireflies, swinging gently from wooden beams. Boots are off. Conversations have drifted into murmurs and sighs. And up above, the stars are out. Same stars as last night, same as the night before. And maybe that's the point. Because out here, in the middle of endless sea, there's one thing a sailor learns fast. Routine is survival. And sleep. Sleep is a sacred ritual. Let's talk about that. The day may change, but the night stays steady. No 2 days at sea were ever quite the same. Some were calm, some were chaos. Maybe you spent your shift patching sails in the sun, or scrubbing decks in the rain. Maybe someone got into a shouting match. Maybe a rope snapped. Maybe you got lucky, and someone shared a piece of sweet biscuit from their stash. But once the sun dipped low, everything slowed down, and the same rhythm returned. You hang your jacket on the same peg, splash the same handful of seawater on your face, crawl into the same worn hammock, in the same tight row of snoozing, snoring bodies. It wasn't glamorous, or fancy, or soft, but it was familiar, and that mattered more than comfort. The sacred act of lying down, there's something weirdly holy about that moment. A sailor finally lies back stiff, hands sore, muscles humming, but then, the ropes cradle your body. The wood groans in time with your breath. The wind sighs through the cracks, and for a few golden minutes, everything feels still, not quiet. Exactly. The ship never shuts up. There's always something creaking, tapping, shifting. But inside, there's a hush, a stillness, a little voice that says, you made it. One more day, one more wave, That's the magic. Why sleep meant more than rest. See, for sailors, sleep wasn't just about recharging. It was escape. It was the only time no one was shouting your name. No one was barking orders or asking you to haul anything. No one was swinging a rope near your head or blaming you for something the wind did. Just quiet, and that quiet, it stitched your sanity back together, one hammock swing at a time. It reminded you that yes, the sea was brutal, but you were still here, still breathing, still dreaming, and somehow that was enough to keep going. Hammocks, the world's saddest, sweetest beds. Let's take a second to appreciate the humble hammock. It wasn't fancy. It was basically a canvas burrito hanging from hooks. But oh, how it mattered. Your hammock was yours. It smelled like you. It sagged just right. It squeaked when you rolled over. You knew exactly how to swing into it without falling out. Well, most of the time. It swayed with the ship's rhythm. It creaked in time with the snores around you. It was your bubble, your floating nest, and on stormy nights, it rocked you like a lullaby, written by Poseidon himself. Some nights were harder than others now. Let's be real. Not every night was peaceful. Sometimes it rained sideways, and water dripped right onto your nose. Sometimes someone next to you had the worst garlic breath in history. Sometimes your thoughts wouldn't stop spinning. Did I lash that crate tight enough? Did the officer see me yawn on watch? Did I just hear rats? But even then, you held on to the ritual, even when it was rough, even when you were cold, because the ritual gave your mind a path to follow. Rope, water, food, watch, sleep, repeat. The ship never stops. So the mind must slow. One thing about sailing, you never really stop. The ship moves even when you don't. The stars spin. The ropes shift. The sea never ever says goodnight. So the sailors had to find stillness in motion. They learned to nap through cannon drills, to doze with one eye open, to dream while one hand rested near their belt knife. Sleep became a kind of defiance, a way to say, I see you, chaos, but tonight, I choose peace. Even if that peace only lasted a few short hours. The ritual repeats, and then morning came. Always, the bell rang, boots hit the floor, groans echoed as men stretched, cursed, and reached for dry socks that somehow weren't dry. Another day began, another day of salt, orders, wind, rope, and duty. But no matter how wild the sea got, they knew tonight would come again, and with it, the same hammock, the same breath, the same whisper of peace. Because even when nothing else made sense, the bedtime ritual did. A final thought before you drift. So tonight, whether you're listening from a soft bed or a tiny couch, close your eyes. Take a slow breath. Imagine the sea rocking gently beneath you, lanterns swaying above, the quiet hum of life aboard an old ship full of dreamers, fighters, and weary hearts. And know this, in a world of waves, chaos, and long nights, sometimes the softest part of the day is when your head meets canvas, your soul meets silence, and the ritual begins again.